Okay, I just saw Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, and I think it's fair to say this is one of, if not the biggest movies of the year so far. People have just been going nuts for this movie, and it's not too surprising given how beloved the first one was. And before I begin, I guess I should say what I thought of the first one. I love it. I think I might be the one person that didn't think it was the best Spider-Man movie ever, but that's definitely not a detriment to it. It is still an amazing movie. It is possibly one of my favorite movies ever, and easily one of my top 3 favorite animated movies I've ever seen. It is phenomenal. I love it. And so what do I think of this one? It was awesome. I think I might like the first one a little bit better though, but this was still a phenomenal movie. It totally lived up to the hype. It was friggin' amazing. And it's one of the few movies where I wasn't entirely sure where it was going to go for a decent chunk of it. For starters, the opening is a lot different than you would think. Instead of opening on Miles, it opens on Gwen. And we get to see a lot more of her backstory, both how she became Spider-Woman. In the first one, we mentioned something that happened to her best friend, so we see what happened with that. And of course, we see how she ultimately gets involved in this fiasco. I won't give too much away, but basically, a villain from another dimension winds up being her universe, and then we meet other spider people, most importantly, Miguel O'Hara, aka Spider-Man 2099. And so she winds up joining them, going through other dimensions, and this whole sequence is like 15, maybe 20 minutes long, and then after that, we get the title. So that should give you an idea of how big and epic this movie is. Like, all that stuff happens before, and then it's like, yeah, now here's the title. That was all that stuff. That was just the beginning. In any other movie, that could have been like the whole first act. As far as I'm aware, this is the longest Western animated movie ever, at least that I know of, and in recent years. This movie is genuinely like 2 hours and 20 minutes, I think, and for the most part, I didn't really feel the length. There were a couple of moments towards the end, jumping ahead a bit, where I was like, okay, yeah, we can start wrapping it up. Although, to be fair, that might be because I saw it at night, so I was getting kind of tired, but either way, I didn't feel the runtime for most of it. So, after we see Gwen, we finally see what Miles has been up to, and how he's been handling being Spider-Man, but also, the typical juggling that stuff with his personal life, most notably with his parents and school and a bunch of other stuff. But as that's happening, we meet this villain called The Spot, and he is one of the best things in this movie, because it starts out like he's just, some villain of the week, just a generic bad guy that he has to fight just to show that's what he does, and then he gets locked away and we never see him again, kind of like Rhino in Amazing Spider-Man 2, and Miles straight up calls him a villain of the week, but no, he's the main villain in this movie. I won't give too much away, but he is the main threat that they have to deal with. And we also go into his backstory quite a bit, and oh my god, this is one of the most hilarious backstories I have ever seen for a villain in any movie. Again, I don't want to spoil it, but I'll just say, the attention to detail on this guy is so hilarious. I was roaring with laughter when I saw his backstory, and I saw this with a bunch of my friends, and they thought it was hilarious too. Miles is able to contain the Spot, but he winds up getting away, so of course, Gwen comes to visit to try and help deal with that, and she just can't help herself from talking to Miles. And honestly, I really like the dynamic between the two of them. They have really great chemistry in this movie. We learn that Gwen has this device that lets her travel to other dimensions without destabilizing, because in the first movie we saw if a person stays in a dimension that is not their own for too long, their body starts to glitch. But thanks to Miguel, Gwen has this watch that prevents her from doing so. And so she winds up going to a different dimension to find Spot, but Miles tags along, and again, I don't want to give too much away, so I'll just kind of keep it simple. If I had to say the best thing about this movie, it is without a doubt the animation. This is one of, if not possibly, the best looking animated movies ever. This movie is absolutely gorgeous. There are so many moments where I was just like, holy shit, that looks amazing. But I think, honestly, the animation's so good it made my jaw drop a couple of times. We see so many different visual styles in this movie. We get the comic book style, the first one. There are some scenes that are more like watercolor style. We get hand-drawn animation. And there's a frigging Lego animated sequence, which I believe was animated by a YouTuber who made like a Lego recreation of the first movie, so that's amazing. We even get multiple live action sequences. And I think this movie can rival the Super Mario Brothers movie in terms of Easter eggs. There are just so many great in-jokes and background characters. You see references to other Spider-Man media, we get references to the Raimi films, the Amazing Spider-Man films, the MCU films, some of the TV shows, Venom, the PS4 game, like Josh Keaton from Spectacular Spider-Man shows up in here, which is really great to see because I think that is an awesome show. Yeah, it is amazing. This movie is a love letter to Spider-Man fans. Like, it is absolutely fantastic. They also really upped the action for this movie. Like, if you thought the first movie was really fast-paced, it is nothing compared to this. It is so insane, it's honestly kind of hard to keep up with sometimes, and I don't mean that as a bad thing. There are just so many little details here. You could pause almost every frame of this movie and hang it on a wall. There is just so much care that was put into it. It was absolutely fantastic. And of course, going to the different dimensions means we get to see a lot more different Spider-Man people than we did in the first one. We have some returning ones, like obviously Gwen, we have Peter B. Parker shows up, there's a cameo from Penny at one point, and we also get to see some brand new ones, like the previously mentioned Miguel. There's this other Spider-Woman that helps her, who is pregnant during most of it, so hope that baby doesn't have any issues. There's this Indian one they meet at one point, a British one who's also a rock star, that one was hilarious. And of course, with all these Spider-Men running around, they of course have to do the classic pointing meme, and it is absolutely hilarious. I think that might have been the best joke in the movie. Although I'm sure you're wondering, I've been praising the hell out of this movie, why didn't I like it as much as the first one? And the main reason is, I feel like the story wasn't as tight. I mean, it's definitely not a bad story, but it can be a little complicated, and I'm sure some people might find that hard to follow. And because of that, I feel like there's a lot more stuff you can like point to and be like, well, okay, that doesn't add up. Okay, that's kind of weird. Yeah, like I said, it's nothing huge. It's not, they're not like massive plot holes or anything, but I feel like there's more stuff you can pick at in this movie, whereas the first one, it was a lot more tight. They were just like, all right, here it is. All right, good, let's go. The main thing is that after Miles goes to like this hub world of all the spider people, and that's where he meets Miguel, and we learn about this thing called canon events, which are basically events that every single spider person across the entire multiverse has to go through, because that's what like connects them together, like being bitten by a spider, having a close loved one die, and a handful of other things. Again, don't want to give too much away, but Miles learns that he will experience one canon event, so he wants to stop it, but Miguel wants to stop him from doing that, because if he does so, the entire universe will fall apart, and that could potentially cause a chain reaction that'll break the multiverse, which it's not entirely elaborated on, like, why or how this happens, but which I can definitely see a lot of people being confused by. It didn't bug me too much, but again, it was like the one thing where I was like, okay, I guess I can go along with that. Like I said, it's nothing crazy, but it can be a little confusing. But I do really like how the theme this kind of brings up. It really discusses the morality of saving one person versus saving a bunch of people. Like, if you can prevent something, should you do it, or should you ultimately let it happen for the greater good? And honestly, I think that's a really interesting debate that this movie brings up. Obviously, they don't go fully in depth, because I assume they're saving this for the second one, but either way, it's still an interesting discussion. I hope this is elaborated on further in the next one, because yes, this is a part one, and funny, like I said earlier, I saw this with my friends, I was the only one that knew this was a part one, so when it ended, they were all just like, wait, what? It ends there? Because yes, this movie ends on a pretty big cliffhanger. Like, I genuinely did not expect it to go where it was going. So, other than the small little nitpicks I have with the story, I thought this movie was absolutely phenomenal. It was engaging, it was fun, dramatic, emotional, jaw-droppingly gorgeous. It is an absolutely fantastic movie, easily the best movie of the year so far. If you haven't seen it, go check it out, especially if you love the first one. High recommendation. Cannot wait for Beyond the Spider-Verse next year.